Welcome to your ultimate guide to painting Blood Angel Space Marines on Flashing Badger Painting. 5 different ways to paint them that range from fast and easy to slow and detailed. Each have their own characteristics. But why? I found starting a new army can be really tough, where I'm trying to pick out a paint scheme that I really like, but it has to have the right kind of time investment as well. So here's 5 ideas in the one place. Let's begin. I'm putting the fastest method first because those of you with little time on your hands can't possibly hang around. Someone better remind me to add chapters below so everyone can jump back and forth to their preferred style. The model has been primed with Wraithbone from Citadel, as this primer proclaims to be the best for contrast or speed paints. If you already have a white primer, you should test a model with that first before you buy new spray cans because you might like the result. There are a few different contrast reds and I've selected Baal Red because I feel Games Workshop is pushing me down that path. For you see, Baal is the Blood Angel's nominal homeworld. Look at me, I can probably call myself a lore channel as well now. People often struggle with contrast paints on smooth panels, like on Space Marines. However, I found it to be no issue, likely because this red is so opaque, but I also followed some handy tips which are: paint it on thicker than you would with normal paint, so load that brush up. Push it in a direction ending with the area of the panel that you want to look the darkest. And don't play around with it too much once you've got the paint on the mini, because this dries fast. I'm trying to be neat and tidy here, but in hindsight, I shouldn't have been afraid to make mistakes, and if I overbrush some of the red into the wrong areas, it doesn't matter. I have black and metallic paint on the way, and that'll easily cover back over the red. I'm painting almost all of the marine, and because I have a primer that is bone coloured, I can't leave any little gaps unpainted, or they will really stand out and look ordinary. I'm now going to paint each of the armour joints using contrast black. I need to be neat now because I don't want to miss and strike those red armour panels with the black. Get into those backpack exhaust vents as well, and then paint the bolt gun weapon casing. Remember that the fastest way to paint a squad of these will be in a batch. So I would pick one up, paint all of the black areas, place it back down, pick up a second, paint all of the black panels and so on. It's a real assembly line and you need to find ways to entertain yourself with music, podcasts, or Flashing Badger videos. There's a few different colours that you can pick out for the accent details on your Blood Angels. I'm talking about the crest on their chest and also any shoulder pauldron decorations. Bone, gold, black, yellow, they will all look the part and I'll show you all of them throughout this video. I'm using black for the shoulder and then I'm using another contrast paint, iodine yellow. Skeleton Horde contrast is going over the top of any parchments or fabric areas. If you already have Seraphim CPL wash, then use this instead. They'll achieve the same look. Back to the symbol on the chest, and to create more depth, I'm using Fire Slayer Flesh contrast, and I'm painting this quite thin and sharp in those recess areas. This is quick, but it helps to make it look more 3D. Metallic sections now, and I'm using Lead Belcher and Vallejo gunmetal is also fantastic. I'm picking out the remainder of the bolt gun. Normally I wash Lead Belcher with Nuln oil, but I'll show you how to get multiple uses from your paints. Grab that same black Templars contrast paint, and using Vallejo airbrush thinner in a 1:1 ratio, I'm making my own Nuln oil and painting this over the metals. You need a paint thinner like this Vallejo airbrush thinner in your painting arsenal. That way you can create a glazer or wash from any of the paints that you have in your collection. Bonus points here if you take the extra time on a few more steps. I'm painting the trim on the shoulder pads in black, and then I'm working my way around the mini and painting in some of those panel lines in black as well. This simple step adds more definition and depth to your marine. Ending with the eyes. Pick a colour that you would like to see army-wide looking back at you. I've selected bright blue because that will pair well with the red. Arithmetic blue is the contrast paint I've picked out, and again I'm thinning this down in a 1:1 ratio. There we go, completed, with some spinny turntable action. The benefits are obvious. This kind of marine is fast and easy to paint, so it's a great selection for a beginner or someone whose focus is on getting to playing the game with as little time spent on painting as possible.
We're staying inside the world of Games Workshop, and our second guide is going to be that classic Citadel painting method. We're going to find ways to make this look nice, but rather than trying to focus on the little pictures inside of a White Dwarf magazine, here it is for you to follow along.
I've primed the model in black so that my shadow areas will be darker and that overall this model won't be as light as the first. Mephiston red as the base coat, and I'm electing to use my airbrush here to show you how quickly you can get a base coat down with the airbrush. If you don't have one and have no intention of making the investment, know that you can paint your base coat by brush. With each coat over the same area, the red will become brighter. So I can create some dark shadows across the marine simply by having only one weak coat all over, then my progressive layers are on the raised areas of the armour. I'm not using a wash on the power armour. Instead I'm mixing corn red with black, and check this out instead. Using a thin brush I'm painting the shadow areas. This will look great on the shoulders and beneath any armour panel overlaps. Straight black is next, and I'm painting this in very thin panel lines. Then I also paint the inside of the exhaust areas of the backpack.
Backpack? Surely Space Marines have a more tactical name for it, like the Mark IV Power School Bag. Nailed it.
Highlights are simple and effective in the Games Workshop style. Evil Sun Scarlet is the first of two highlights. I'm painting this on all the raised panel edges. This highlight is a little thicker because I will need to leave enough room for a thinner highlight still to come. I'm really liking how the armour looks so far. The thinner highlight will be with Wild Rider Red, which is not to be confused with Winona Ryder Red. I'm focusing my efforts on the most prominent and raised areas that will be catching the light. Orientate your model from where you want the light to be shining from, and if you can't see a part, don't highlight it. You can leave it how it is or add one smaller highlight using Fire Dragon Bright. I'll show you how it looks with the extra step. It helps to take the contrast of your armour from the dark red and black mix all the way across to a vibrant orange. I'm only painting the base here so that it looks pretty for the rest of the video. Plenty of areas to paint black again. Thin the black down, otherwise you will find that it can look lumpy on the model. I'm picking out one of the knee pads. This would look really good later with a white decal or freehand drawing on it. Black trim around the shoulder pad, and take your time here. Being neat here will make all the difference between this armour looking amazing or looking sloppy. I'm painting the chest symbol and the bolt gun casing in black as well. I would probably keep intercessors with these standard boring colours and maybe add gold symbols to some of my elite units. I highlight blacks with greys, and I like to have a little blue in the grey as well as a personal preference, which is why I'm starting with Eshin Grey. It's the same technique as the red armour. Standard Mechanicus Grey will be the second highlight. Lead Belcher is the choice of metallic, and I'm painting in the armour limb joints. The extra areas are the exhaust vents of the school bag, the small metallic sections of the helmet, and then the remainder of the bolt gun. I'm washing the metallics with Nuln Oil. You want to fill the recessed texture areas, but avoid having it pool or it looks chunky and chalky when it dries. Okay, fine. A little gold on the model. Retributor gold on the symbol of the bolt gun, and then I wash this with Agrax Earthshade to take some of the intensity away and bring out those textures. Not much left now, highlighting the metallic areas with Runefang Steel. What else? Alright, the shoulder symbol. Okay, let's try that bone and white as a colour scheme. I'm basing with Xandri Dust first.
And out of focus. Great.
Xandri Dust is the base layer and it will end up acting as the shadow in the recesses of the wings. I'm using off-white from Vallejo and painting the wings, but leaving those thin shadow areas of Xandri Dust behind. Vallejo have a great fluorescent green, and I'm using this over the top of the off-white for some glowing eyes on this marine. And just like that, he's done. Let's take a look on the turntable. Yep, I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I don't think that this took much longer to paint compared to the contrast method, but I appreciate that a lot of time was saved with the airbrush base coat of red. I do prefer how this red armour starts so dark and works its way back to orange compared to the direct bright red contrast that we had first.
Ooh, fun fact. You can now become a Flashing Badger member on YouTube and become a part of our little core community. Only $1.50 dollary dues a month. More on that later. Third Marine. Number 4 and 5 are going to be fun, trust me on that. But with this one, I want to find some happy middle ground between our first two. I want something that's fast to paint, but I really want some contrast on the armour between dark and light for the red.
My marine is starting primed black again, but instead of basing red, we are spraying with white. Yep, it's preferred to online as Zenithal highlight, and it's also the starting point for the slapping of the Chop style. I'm using titanium white acrylic ink from Liquitex. Note that I'm not base coating the marine. Instead, I'm spraying from the top down, and the white is catching the raised areas and only faintly reaching to some of those lower areas. This is really obvious on the legs. Now I'm adding the colour. This is a red ink from Liquitex, and the important part is that this is a transparent paint. So rather than covering all of the previous paints, this will tint and colour the previous layers.
Looking at the marine now, you can see that under the panels in the areas like the legs, it's still quite dark. But on those raised prominent areas like the helmet and the shoulders, it's looking pretty bright.
Black contrast paint allows me to quickly cover the areas I need to. The knee pad, the bolt gun, the chest, and the shoulder trim. We can speed through these parts because we know what we're doing now. Lead belcher for the metallic areas, like in the limb joints and the remainder of the bolt gun. Then once dry, I'm coming over the top with Nuln Oil as my shade. A fast and effective way to complete the shoulder icons are to base them in Wraithbone, and once dry, simply add a wash of Seraphim Sepia and this will look quite nice. Temple Guard Blue for the eyes. Again, I'm thinning this down and painting over the white to create a glowing tint rather than a solid blue. I'm highlighting the wings on the shoulder with a bright white and I'm calling the model complete. Interesting, I came into this model wanting to find a balance between the first two. I expected it would take a little longer to paint but achieve a nicer power armour compared to the solid opaque red contrast paint. But this ended up being faster to paint, I think. If I had a squad of these, it would take me only a couple of minutes to spray the red armour across all of them compared to brush painting the contrast paint on. I prefer this armour over the contrast, but the GW style of power armour is still my favourite so far.
Okay then, the Games Workshop style so far has been my favourite, so what I'm going to do is take those steps and then change a few and even add in a couple more just to make it unique for me and hopefully improve it. Then number 5 is going to be completely out of left field.
The dark to light contrast on the armour is important to me, so I'm going to invest some time here. The first of the extra steps I'm adding is to start with corn red which is a darker colour as my base coat, and will act as a shadow colour. Once dry now, I'm airbrushing the Mephiston red, and like we did with the inks, I'm orientating the model in my hand so that I spray from the top down. It means that I'm starting my armour with a highlight already built in. That corn red and black mix for the targeted shadows looked really good, so I'm using it again. Slow and steady around the shoulder trim makes this look slick. Now, instead of painting the basic edge highlights as we saw in the Citadel method, I'm instead going to create a glaze with the Evil Sun Scarlet and attempt to create a smoother blend of a highlight on those raised sections of the armour. Using thinner, the red is now transparent and quite weak. I paint this in the highlighted areas and in a direction so that I'm lifting the brush in the area that I want to be brighter. I'm working my way around each of the panels, and the great thing about highlighting Space Marines is that you can treat each part of the armour as its own shape. The legs, for example, are more cylindrical. Wild Rider red, and this is my thin edge highlight. You could continue the smooth blending here and again create a glaze and repeat the technique from the previous red. And Fire Dragon Bright in the sharpest corners and most raised sections of the armour as my brightest highlight.
The armour will get some more attention from me shortly, but I want to get a feel for the rest of the model first.
Jumping across to the black for the knee pad, and then lead belcher for the metallic of the limb joints, parts of the bolt gun, and any other small mechanical looking areas of my Marine. Nuln oil over the top of the metallic, and they don't need any more attention from me. My goal is to have the time invested into making the armour stand out, and the remainder of the model can be tidy and tame. I like my Marines to look like they've already been battle tested in a lengthy campaign, as I feel that this helps tell a story about them. To sell this idea, I create some chipping to their armour. Using a small piece of foam or sponge, dip the corner into Rhinox hide brown, dab some of the excess away, and then lightly touch against areas of the armour that you want to be damaged. I focus chipping on edges that I feel would frequently have contact from scraping against objects, like the outside of the leg panels. I'm now helping the chipping to look 3D by painting a thin outline for the lower half of the chipped areas with my Wild Rider red highlight colour. If you want freehand or decals, apply these before this weathering step so that your chipping affects whatever decorations or symbols were painted onto the Marine's armour. I finally remembered to paint the shoulder trim and the chest symbol in black. I'm basing the shoulder symbol in Xandri Dust again, and to add a different look to my Marine, I'm also painting the bolt gun weapon casing in the same colour.
My theory being that now 3 colours are represented across the model. There's the main red, the black, and now the accent bone colours.
All the same highlighting techniques to finish these parts of the model. A Seraphim sepia wash, and then Ushabti bone, and an off-white highlight across the wings and the weapon casing. And to finish off, I've decided to add those dark gold symbols again to the bolt gun and the opposite shoulder. And off screen, I've used the same fluoro green eye technique because I'm really enjoying how it looks. So what do I think compared to the Citadel style Marine I painted? Well, there's no denying that they are similar, but I like that with the armour, they are both as bright as one another, but mine has darker darks in the shadows, so it drags that transition out, which I really like. I think some light battle damage afford them more character, and the bone-coloured bolt gun casing, for me, makes them look a little more tactical and unique without having to introduce a new colour to the scheme. But what do you think?
Now it's time for the 5th Space Marine. And, spoiler alert, this one ends up being my absolute favourite. Of the 5 Marines that I paint in this video, only one of them is my own design, and even that has borrowed heavily from the Citadel painting guide. This is a Grimdark painting scheme designed by Trovarian Miniatures. His amazing tutorial is up on his YouTube page, and I'll add a link for that in the description below. So please provide him with the support and credit he absolutely deserves.
Let's dive in. Black prime because Grimdark starts with black surely. Great news because the most eye-catching scheme in this video doesn't even need an airbrush. I have scissors, tweezers, a small amount of plucking foam or sponge, and Rhinox hide brown. I'm working my way around all of the armor panels and dabbing this on. I'm not covering the entirety of the model, otherwise I would just brush paint. Instead, the sponge is capturing maybe around 80 to 90% of the surface and leaving the remainder black. Now I'm working my way from brown to bright red in multiple different stages. Starting with a mix of Mephiston red and the Rhinox hide on my palette, notice how I'm dabbing away some of the paint on the palette before I get to the model, so that I avoid big splotches of paint ruining the effect. My goal here is to achieve a stippling effect with the brightest of the reds being towards the centre of each of the individual armour panels and the darkest areas being around the edges. I will transition to brush shortly, but for these large smooth areas I'm speeding up the process by using the sponge. Now with the brush I can be more precise and get to some of those hard to reach places without striking other areas of the armour. Because my paint is thinned down, I can create a subtle blend by stippling in multiple layers. By the time I come back around having done a lap of the model, the first parts are dry again. Mephiston red on its own is next, and it is all brush from here. I'm using an older brush because having some of the hairs pointing in a few different directions actually helps with the stippling. Same technique, but painting less of each armour panel and focusing this colour towards the centre.
I'm really enjoying this. It might be because I can start to see the marine coming to life, but I also think I just really enjoy painting a smooth armoured space marine in a different style.
Evil Sun Scarlet mixed with a small amount of Administratum Grey creates a bright red highlight. Thin down, and this step is quick because I'm only targeting the very centre of the armour panels now. Now that it has dried, have a look at this armour. Come on, this is really cool. I know that dark and grimy isn't for everyone, but I love how different it is. It looks more gruesome and scary, but the reds are still bright and vibrant. I won't keep you waiting long. Let's power through some of the other areas now because we've already seen these techniques a few times. Black. Slow and tidy for the shoulder trim, and then I'm mixing it with Incubi Darkness and painting the chest symbol and the casing of the bolt gun. I create some highlights with grey and paint these across the same areas, but then wash over the top of these blacks and greys with Seraphim Sepia. This helps to disguise the blends of the colours and acts as a warm, grimy colour to keep with the theme. Some edge highlights to make them pop again, and then some thin wear marks and scratches using Nurgling Green. Lead Belcher for the metallic areas, and I'm going to wash with Nuln Oil, but if you want to go further down the weathered path, then use a brown wash like Agrax Earthshade or one of the army painted tones instead. Xandri Dust as a base for the wings, and once dry I'm washing Seraphim Sepia over it as a shadow. I'm resting my forearms on the desk and taking my time with the eyes, using Vallejo Off-White and a thin tipped brush. Nobody make a noise. Then using the same colour while it's on the palette to highlight the wings.
Fluoro green eyes, because by now hopefully I've convinced you they look pretty cool.
I was about to call the model finished, but decided to add some dirt and rust to the metallic areas. Rhinox hide mixed with Scrofulous brown, and then a 1:1 ratio with thinner to create a wash. Brushing this over the areas of the metallic where water would gather and pool. Then same again with Troll Slayer orange in a 1:1 ratio with thinner, and paint this in the very corners in small amounts. When this dries, it will look like rust beginning to form. Okay, the model is completed and this looks so cool. Time-wise, the model took the longest, but surprisingly not by much. With batch painting, the others will be faster I think, but this is still my favourite. If you want a 10-man kill team to look great, this is how I would do it. This will give the squad so much character and you could invent some awesome backstory for a brutal campaign that they've been enduring. Thank you again to Trovarian, as I'm saving your tutorial and coming back to it again, because I'm certainly not done with painting Space Marines now.
Reflecting on all 5, they each have their own pros and cons, and really it's going to come down to what you like the look of, and also your own personal circumstances, what sort of time and effort you'll be able to invest into your army. If you're going to start a Blood Angels army, I'd love to know if you're going to use one of the 5 schemes we've covered here, or if you have something else planned. This video was all Blood Angels, but if you'd like to see a different chapter, a different faction, or something completely outside of the Warhammer universe, well then you best let me know below. And if you see the answer you already like there, give it a thumbs up to draw attention to it. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, it's because you're one of the incredible supporters that has contributed to the growth of this channel over the last year. Firstly, thank you so much for everything you've done. There is a YouTube Flashing Badger painting membership that's now available. It's for the baseline lowest amount that YouTube offers of $1.50 a month. If you find yourself in a position to contribute financially, there's that option as well. At the moment, the perks are really simple. There's some badges, stickers, and emojis for our members, and you also get to help steer the direction of the content for the channel. But honestly, the main reason is knowing that you're helping to contribute to more videos to come. Thank you so much again. And what's coming up for the channel next? Well, the next video will probably be a painting guide, but this is a collaboration with a really talented person overseas that I'm so excited about. And also, I'm gearing up for a live painting session if you finally want to get to meet and interact online. But just know, I've been putting it off because I'm absolutely terrified. But thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.